Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a regulatory structure that is, well, famously thorough, the intricate world of Irish employment law.
It's a system that's really built on two main pillars. You have the traditional Irish national legislation,
Yep.
and then you have this powerful baseline that's been established by European Union directives.
Right. So, our mission today, for anyone who needs to get up to speed on this, is to understand how those two legal forces interact.
And crucially, how compliance is actually enforced by two really powerful oversight bodies.
The moment you even start thinking about employment in Ireland, you're dealing with a system that's just so deeply woven. It's not just a random set of rules, is it?
No, not at all. It's a real commitment to, continental standards of worker protection.
So let's start right there with the foundation. How do these national laws actually incorporate and enforce those EU principles?
Well, what's fascinating here is how seamless the integration is. I mean, Ireland, as an EU member, is required to implement directives.
On things like anti-discrimination, health, and safety.
Exactly. And working time. The Irish Oireachtas then takes these standards and transposes them into domestic acts. It just ensures this high, predictable baseline of protection that employers across the entire EU have to recognize.
And that tiered structure gives employees some serious protection. So let's drill down into the three big areas we were asked to look at, starting with probably the heaviest hitter, equality.
Mm,
The Employment Equality Acts from 1998 to 2015 are incredibly strict. They prohibit workplace discrimination on, 9 specific grounds?
9, yeah. And that level of specificity is really what gives this law so much power. We're talking about age, gender, civil status, family status, sexual orientation, religion, disability, race.
And membership of the traveling community.
That's the one. If
Okay.
you're an employer, you just cannot take any action on recruitment, pay, training, dismissal based on any of those protected characteristics.
That list is so comprehensive, it must make the burden of proof when you're defending a claim of unequal treatment extremely high for the employer.
Precisely. It creates a very robust legal environment where defensible HR practices are just critical. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these laws are essentially mandating proactive fairness.
So they require transparency. You have to show your decision-making wasn't biased.
Exactly. In any of those 9 areas.
Okay, moving on. The foundation is also secured by the National Minimum Wage Act of 2000. That's pretty self-explanatory. But then there's the Organization of Working Time Act from 1997. What's the core focus there?
That act is the regulator for practically every aspect of an employee's time. It covers mandatory rest periods, daily and weekly breaks, rules around Sunday work,
And all the leave entitlements.
annual leave, public holidays, all of it. It basically exists to ensure that commercial needs don't override the fundamental right to rest and recovery,
And beyond those big three, we have other safety nets like the Unfair Dismissals Acts.
which govern how terminations have to be handled, yeah.
And the Payment of Wages Act, which is just to make sure people get paid what they're owed without any unlawful deductions.
That's right. And the Unfair Dismissals Act, in particular, is a source of significant strategic risk for businesses. It means that simply paying redundancy or notice, it's just not enough.
To prove you were fair.
You have to demonstrate substantive and procedural fairness if you dismiss someone. A poorly managed termination can become a very costly WRC case very quickly.
Which connects us directly to our next segment, because having laws is one thing, but having a quick, accessible, and powerful mechanism for redress, that's what makes the system work.
Absolutely.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The enforcement backbone.
This is so crucial to understand because this is where disputes are actually resolved.
Mm.
You have two primary control bodies. The first, and by far the most active, is the Workplace Relations Commission, or WRC.
So how should we think about the WRC? Is it like a full-blown court?
Not exactly. It's better to think of the WRC as the frontline dispute resolution engine. It's designed to be low cost and highly accessible for the employee.
And they handle a massive volume of disputes.
A huge volume. They offer mediation services, and they conduct formal investigations. They process all the initial complaints relating to breaches of the core laws we just talked about: equality, working time, unfair dismissals.
So an employee files a complaint, it goes to the WRC, and the WRC acts as the initial adjudicator. They can issue legally binding decisions and even conduct workplace inspections.
Correct. And the fact that the process is relatively quick, it's confidential, and low cost for the employee. It means that employers are often under significant pressure to resolve disputes early.
Right. Through mediation, if possible.
Ideally, yes. before a formal adjudication ruling is ever made.
Okay, but what happens if one party isn't happy with the WRC's ruling?
Then they move up the chain to the labor court. And this is where we need to be really clear on the distinction. The labor court acts as the appellate body.
So it's not retrial.
No, it doesn't typically rehear the entire case from scratch. Instead, it reviews the WRC's decision, either on a point of law or based on a challenge to the WRC's findings of fact.
So the labor court is more of a review board, just ensuring the WRC applied the law correctly and followed due process.
Precisely. It provides that essential layer of review before a case would potentially escalate into the high courts. Understanding that clear structure WRC for the initial complaint and mediation, labor court for appeal and review, that's vital.
Let's pivot now from regulation to the practical reality of running a business, the financial side. If you're an employer, what are the mandatory costs that hit the bottom line beyond just the basic salary?
Well, the first one, as we mentioned, is the national minimum wage. In 2023, that baseline was $11.30 per hour for an adult over 20.
But you have to remember that rate is reviewed annually.
It is, and it consistently rises, which keeps pressure on labor costs.
And then we get into the social contributions, which are pretty substantial. We have to talk about PRSI, pay-related social insurance.
This is a huge cost burden for employers. It's what funds the social safety net. The standard employer contribution rate is 11.05% of the employee's gross earnings.
And that 11.05% isn't just a number.
No, it's what funds state pensions, job seeker benefits, all the various social insurance schemes. It's really the strategic cost of maintaining the Irish welfare state.
And we have to talk about a recent and very dynamic change, sick pay. This is no longer just optional employer policy.
No, it's a statutory requirement now. And this is perhaps the single biggest structural pressure point in recent employment law history. Starting in 2023, businesses had to provide 3 days of statutory sick leave per year.
But that's just the start, isn't it?
That's the critical part. The law mandates a phased increase. It's rising to 5 days in 2024, 7 days in 2025, and a full 10 days of statutory sick leave annually by 2026.
Wow. Going from 0 to 10 mandated paid sick days in just a few years is a massive jump, especially for SMEs, the small and medium-sized businesses.
I mean, they might not have the cash reserves to absorb that kind of expense. It creates an immediate strategic challenge. Businesses have to plan for that escalating cost and implement clear sick leave management policies to prevent abuse.
Knowing that the liability is just going up year after year. And lastly, if an employee is made redundant, what is the clear-cut financial obligation?
The statutory minimum for redundancy is non-negotiable. 2 weeks' pay for every year of service, plus 1 additional week.
Can you make that concrete for us?
Sure. Let's say an employee earns €600 a week and has worked for 5 years. That's 10 weeks' pays, so €6,000 plus the extra week, another €600. So that's 6,600 total. That simplicity is set in stone.
Okay, let's flip the lens now and look at the financial reality for the worker. What are the key deductions they're going to see on their payslip?
There are 3 main deductions. First is the standard progressive income tax, which moves from a 20% standard rate to a 40% higher rate.
Right.
Second, employees also pay their own contribution towards PRSI, funding those same social benefits.
And the third one is a bit unique. It's the Universal Social Charge, or USC. This is where a lot of people get tripped up.
The USC is fascinating because it was brought in during the financial crisis. It was supposed to be an emergency measure to raise revenue, and it just never left.
So it's another tax.
It's essentially another tax, yeah. It's applied to gross income above a pretty low threshold, around €13,000, with rates that go from 0.5% up to 8% for higher earners. It significantly impacts an employee's true disposable income.
Let's move into the day-to-day procedures then. When someone starts a new job, there's a really strict requirement about getting their contract details, isn't there?
Yes. The employer has a legal duty to provide a written statement of terms within 5 days of the person starting work.
5 days. Why the rush? Why not a month?
Well, the short deadline is a legislative measure. It's designed to protect against casualization and to ensure the worker knows exactly what they're agreeing to almost immediately. It's about formal documentation from day one.
And what about working hours? We mentioned the Act. What's the hard limit on how many hours someone can work?
The maximum average working week is 48 hours, but the key word there is average.
Ah, so it's not a hard stop every single week.
Exactly. It's calculated over a typical 4-month reference period. So you might have some weeks over 48 hours, maybe during a peak season, but they have to be balanced out by shorter weeks over that 4-month window.
That gives employers some flexibility, at least.
It does, while still providing that core protection for the worker.
I wonder how that 48-hour limit interacts with high-pressure sectors like tech or finance. That must require some very careful scheduling.
It absolutely does. And there could be specific derogations or different reference periods for certain sectors, but that 48-hour ceiling remains the standard. It needs diligent oversight.
Let's quickly detail the leave entitlements in Ireland, because they are quite generous.
They are. Standard annual leave is 4 weeks paid leave a year. That's mandatory.
Plus the 9 paid public holidays.
Right, or equivalent time off or pay in lieu. And the family leave provisions are very strong. Maternity leave grants 26 weeks of paid leave with an option for an additional 16 unpaid weeks.
And that's not all.
No. Parental leave allows up to 26 weeks of unpaid leave per parent for a child under 12. These provisions are really fundamental to work-life balance in Ireland.
And if an employee feels their employer isn't following these rules, say shorting them on leave, where do they go?
Back to the WRC. That is the initial mandatory step for seeking recourse on almost all employment rights breaches.
Meanwhile, the employer has all these parallel duties. They have to register with Revenue for payee, PRSI, and USC withholding.
And they're overseen by the Health and Safety Authority to provide a safe working environment. The compliance burden is high.
And it all ties back to that requirement for fairness, especially in dismissals.
Exactly. It's a closed loop, all overseen by the WRC.
So what does this highly regulated structure mean for the cultural flavor of the Irish workplace? So what does this all mean on the ground?
It's interesting. Irish culture often features relatively flat hierarchies. Management is usually approachable. Communication tends to be open and direct. The atmosphere is generally friendly and sociable.
Which can sometimes mask the formality of this legal structure underneath.
That's a great point. The personal approach often coexists with very formal rules.
Another nuance is the role of trade unions. Do they still hold much sway?
They absolutely do. Unions are still highly significant, particularly in public sectors like health, education, and transport. Collective bargaining is prevalent and often sets the tone for the private sector, too.
Looking at more contemporary issues now, like remote work, what specific steps has Ireland taken to address that?
Well, we've seen a big governmental effort to introduce legislation to formalize the right to request remote work.
Not a right to remote work, but a right to request it.
Exactly. It isn't a guaranteed right, but it sets out clear procedures for how an employer must consider and respond to a request. It shows the system adapting to post-pandemic norms.
And what about diversity? We touched on the 9 grounds, but is there anything else larger employers have to do?
Yes. To reinforce that commitment, large employers are now specifically required to report on their gender pay gap data. That transparency is meant to push companies towards genuine parity.
Finally, let's touch on Brexit. Did the UK's departure cause any major structural cracks in Irish employment rights, given how tied they are to the EU?
Thankfully, no. This is where the strength of Ireland's deep integration with the EU really shows its resilience. The direct impact on the core rights of Irish workers has been very limited.
So the effects were more on the logistics and trade side of things.
Pretty much. It meant UK and EU workers had to ensure they had the right permits, but the framework of protection for the domestic worker, that remains entirely intact and EU-aligned.
That structural stability seems to be the biggest takeaway here. Ireland has this robust, EU-aligned labor structure underpinned by detailed national laws, and it's all diligently enforced by the WRC and the Labour Court.
And if we think about that escalating financial pressure we discussed, that mandated sick pay rising to a full 10 days by 2026, it does raise an important question for you to think about.
Go on.
Will this rising fixed cost accelerate the adoption of, say, part-time contracts? Or will it push smaller Irish businesses towards more automation to mitigate what is really an escalating human capital risk?
A fascinating structural pressure point. It could really redefine the small business landscape. If you want to dive deeper into any of this, we highly recommend checking the official government resources.
The Workplace Relations Commission at www.workplacerelations.ie is the main one.
Also, the Excellent Citizens Information site, and of course, the Revenue website.
Use these resources to turn this knowledge into applied knowledge.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.